The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glare on the sleek, modern workspace filled with rows of desks cluttered with dual monitors and coffee mugs. I could feel the hum of the air conditioning as I sat at my station, surrounded by the clattering of keyboards and the low murmur of my colleagues engaged in animated discussions. It was a typical day at the tech company, but tension crackled in the air like static electricity. I had just finished reviewing my old code, the one that had kept the pipeline running smoothly, and I couldn't shake the unease that settled in my chest as I anticipated the upcoming team meeting. As I entered the meeting room, the atmosphere shifted. Mark, my coworker, leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a smirk playing on his lips. "Are we really going to waste time on that outdated code of yours, Samantha?" The laughter that erupted from the others felt like daggers, each one piercing deeper into my resolve. I clenched my fists under the table, fighting the urge to defend my work. I had poured countless hours into that code, and it was the backbone of our $1.1 billion project. But here I was, the butt of their jokes, just like I had feared. The mockery stung, and I could feel my cheeks flush with embarrassment. How could they not see the value in what I had created? In that moment, I was torn between the desire to prove myself and the crushing weight of their ridicule. My heart raced as I glanced at the projector screen, the bright visuals of the latest innovations contrasting sharply with the shadows of doubt creeping into my mind. I had to find a way to turn this around. I needed to show them that my code wasn't just old, it was essential. As I sat there, listening to Mark's dismissive remarks and the laughter that followed, I realized that this was more than just a workplace conflict. It was a battle for my dignity, for the respect I hoped to earn. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I had the chance to turn this mockery into a moment of redemption. The stakes were high, and I was determined to prove that my old code could still be the lifeline we desperately needed. The late afternoon sun filtered through the blinds of my home office, casting striped patterns across the cluttered desk. The faint smell of burnt coffee lingered in the air, a reminder of my late-night coding sessions. I took a deep breath, trying to push away the self-doubt that had taken root in my mind. My fingers trembled slightly as they hovered above the keyboard, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on me. I had always loved coding, but now, with Mark's mocking laughter echoing in my head, I couldn't shake the feeling that my skills were obsolete. Flashes of our last team lunch invaded my thoughts. Mark had leaned back in his chair, a smug grin plastered across his face as he had ridiculed my so-called outdated coding techniques. "Samantha, how does it feel to be stuck in the past?" he had taunted, laughter spilling out from our colleagues like a wave. I had forced a smile, but inside I felt as if I were crumbling. The laughter had cut deep, a stark contrast to the camaraderie I once cherished. I had a choice to make. I could either let his arrogance drown me or rise above it. I glanced at the half-finished mug of coffee, its contents now cold, much like the encouragement I had expected from my teammates. Jenna had tried to reassure me later that day, wrapping her arms around me in a comforting embrace. "You know your code is valuable, right?" she had said, her voice soft and encouraging. I wanted to believe her, but the doubt lingered like a shadow. I had to prove not just to Mark, but to myself that my work mattered. As I paced the room, I could feel my heart racing with determination. I imagined the day ahead when I would stand up to Mark, demanding respect for my contributions. The thought sent a shiver down my spine. Could I really confront him? I pictured his smug expression, the way he dismissed my work as irrelevant. I couldn't let that happen again. I would find a way to show everyone the value of my old code. With newfound resolve, I opened my laptop, the screen flickering to life. I began typing furiously, pouring my energy into the code that had once felt like a lifeline. Each line I typed reflected my determination to reclaim my worth. I had to prepare for the confrontation, not just with Mark, but with the doubts that had plagued me for too long. I was ready to fight for my place in this industry, to prove that experience and tradition still had a place in a world obsessed with innovation. The atmosphere in the chaotic work environment felt heavy, every breath I took tinged with anxiety and frustration. My desk was a mess of half-finished projects and hastily scribbled notes, each one a reminder of my struggle to find common ground with Mark. His laughter echoed through the office, sharp and mocking, as he dismissed my old code in front of the team. I could feel my blood boiling, the heat creeping up my neck, and I clenched my fists under the table, nails digging into my palms. Mark's voice rang out again, cutting through the murmur of my colleagues who were trying to mask their discomfort with forced smiles. "Can we really risk using outdated methods when we have the latest technology at our fingertips?" He scoffed, crossing his arms as if to shield himself from the very idea that my contributions could hold any value. It was a direct jab, and the laughter that followed felt like daggers aimed at my confidence. I wanted to scream, to tell him that my code wasn't just old, It had saved us during previous crunch times, but all that came out was a shaky breath. I glanced around the room, taking in the faces of my coworkers, some sympathetic, others eager to join in Mark's ridicule. Jenna, my supportive partner, was seated near the back, her eyes wide with concern. I could see her biting her lip, but the way her fingers tapped nervously on the table betrayed her unease. I shot her a quick glance, trying to convey my need for support without losing my composure. As the meeting dragged on, I felt the tension coil tighter around me, stifling any remaining resolve. I recalled the countless late nights I had spent programming, pouring my heart into that code, believing it could bridge the gap between innovation and tradition. My mind flickered back to moments spent with Tom, my best friend, who would always remind me of the value of perseverance. "You know the truth, Sam, don't let them shake your belief," he had said during one of our brainstorming sessions. But as Mark's laughter echoed in my ears, I felt that belief slipping away like sand through my fingers. I stood up, heart racing, ready to confront Mark. "Maybe you should consider that innovation doesn't always mean abandoning what works. My code has been the backbone of our operations," I asserted, my voice trembling but firm. The room fell silent, eyes darting between Mark and me, the tension palpable. I could feel my breath hitching in my throat, the weight of their scrutiny heavy on my shoulders. Mark's expression shifted, a flicker of surprise crossing his face before his trademark smirk returned. "You're clinging to the past, Samantha. How can you expect to move forward if you're stuck in a time warp?" His words stung, igniting a fire within me. I knew I had to stand my ground, but doubt crept in again, whispering that maybe he was right. I took a deep breath, the air thick with anticipation, and put my hands on the table to steady myself. This isn't just about the code, it's about recognizing the value of experience. Sometimes the tried and tested is what we need when things go south, I countered, my voice steadier than before. The room remained tense, the silence stretching painfully as everyone processed my words. I could feel a flicker of hope igniting within me, battling against the fear that had rooted itself deep in my chest. Maybe, just maybe, I could turn this around, but first I had to face the looming crisis, a system failure that threatened everything we had built. I had to push through the chaos and convince my team that my code was not something to be discarded, but rather a lifeline we desperately needed. The dim glow of my laptop screen illuminated the cramped confines of my home office, where I was surrounded by the faint scent of stale coffee and the comforting hum of the heater. I had been up for hours, my fingers dancing across the keyboard, desperately trying to formulate a plan that would make my outdated code shine amidst the chaos that had engulfed our company. The pressure felt like a vice around my chest, squeezing tighter with each passing moment. I could almost hear the ticking clock echoing my frustration, reminding me that time was slipping away. As I stared at lines of code that had once been the backbone of our operations, a flicker of hope ignited within me. I remembered the late nights spent in front of the screen, fueled by determination and the belief that my work mattered. I could hear Tom's encouraging words from our last conversation, his voice a gentle reminder that sometimes the most unconventional solutions could be the most effective. But that reassurance was quickly overshadowed by the gnawing anxiety in my gut. Would my colleagues even consider my code after the fallout? The tension had only escalated after the crisis hit. Mark's dismissive attitude during our last brainstorming session echoed in my mind, his arrogance like a cloud hovering over our discussions. I recalled the disdain in his voice as he belittled my contributions, framing them as relics of a bygone era. Yet I knew that those same lines of code had saved us in the past. Would they not do so again? The irony stung, but I had to push through. I envisioned the team gathered in that sterile conference room, eyes narrowed as they awaited my proposal. The thought sent shivers down my spine. What if they laughed? What if Mark mocked me again? I shook my head, trying to dispel those thoughts. It was time to reclaim my narrative, to remind them that innovation didn't always mean tossing aside the old. With each keystroke, I felt a mix of desperation and resolve. I needed to convince them that my code wasn't just a leftover artifact, but a vital resource that could guide us through the impending storm. I could almost see the skeptical expressions on their faces, the way they'd rolled their eyes when I first suggested we revisit my work. I had to find a way to bridge that gap, to turn their doubt into understanding. Late into the night, I crafted a presentation that would highlight not just the functionality of my code, but its historical significance, the successes we'd achieved with it in the past. I infused my slides with details about the pipeline it had supported, the lifeblood of our company. I wanted them to see it as I did, not just lines of text, but a testament to resilience and adaptability. As the clock struck midnight, I leaned back in my chair, my heart racing with anticipation. Tomorrow would bring a new opportunity to stand my ground and fight for what I believed in. The stakes were high and the weight of my decision loomed large. I was terrified, yet invigorated by the challenge ahead. I knew that if I wanted to be taken seriously, I had to face Mark and the team with unwavering confidence. This was my moment to shine, to show them that beneath every outdated line of code lay the potential for something remarkable, and I would not let them reduce my work to a punchline any longer. The atmosphere in the office felt electric, charged with a mix of hope and lingering tension as I prepared for the team's strategy meeting. The bright overhead lights illuminated the conference room, making the whiteboard gleam like a blank canvas waiting to be filled with ideas. My heart raced as I glanced at the scattered papers on my desk, filled with lines of code that held the potential to bridge the gap between my colleagues and me. I could almost hear the whispers of doubt in my mind, a persistent reminder of the mockery I had faced, but I pushed those thoughts aside. This was my opportunity to unite the team, to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. As my colleagues entered the room, I noted the cautious expressions on their faces. Mark sauntered in last, a slight smirk on his lips, but even he seemed to carry the weight of our recent failures. The faint scent of fresh coffee wafted through the air, a small comfort against the backdrop of anxiety. I took a deep breath, my palms were clammy, but I knew I had to project confidence. Thank you for gathering here today. I know we've faced challenges, and I want to discuss how we can leverage my old code to navigate the crisis ahead. It's time for us to collaborate to turn this ship around together. Mark raised an eyebrow, a hint of skepticism in his demeanor. You really think that outdated code can help us now? It's like using a flip phone in a smartphone world, he shot back, his tone laced with sarcasm. My stomach twisted at his words, but I refused to let him undermine my resolve. I had seen the potential in that code, the lifeline it represented, and I wasn't about to back down. I understand your concerns, Mark, but this isn't about old versus new, it's about what works. That code has been the backbone of our systems for years, and it's been overlooked. Let's explore how it can be integrated into our current framework, I replied, my voice steady despite the racing thoughts in my head. The silence that followed felt heavy, punctuated only by the distant sound of typing from the adjacent office. I could feel the tension in the air as my colleagues exchanged glances, their expressions wavering between doubt and curiosity. Tom, my best friend, leaned forward, breaking the silence. I think Samantha has a point. We've been so focused on the new that we've lost sight of the foundation we built. Maybe we should give her code a chance. It could surprise us all, he said, his tone encouraging. I felt a surge of gratitude for his support, a small spark igniting my determination. As the discussion unfolded, I sensed a shift in the room. Slowly, my teammates began to warm to the idea of revisiting my code. I watched them scribble notes, their brows furrowed in concentration. The air crackled with possibilities, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. It was as if the walls that had closed in around me were beginning to open, allowing light to pour in. But I knew that this was just the beginning. I had to keep pushing forward to ensure that my code would be accepted not just out of necessity, but out of respect for my contributions. As we wrapped up the meeting, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The path to reconciliation was still fraught with challenges, but I was determined to keep my colleagues engaged and invested in our collective success. I left the conference room with my head held high, the echoes of my teammates' tentative agreement ringing in my ears. It was time to forge ahead, to transform my vision into reality, and to prove that collaboration could triumph over conflict. This was not just about me anymore, it was about the entire team, and I was ready to lead us into the next phase of our journey together. The days following the crisis felt like a fog settling over the office, thick and suffocating. I could sense the subtle shift in the air, a mixture of anxiety and hope that seemed to pulse through the hallways of the tech company. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow over my desk, now cluttered with printouts of my old code. Each sheet felt like a lifeline, a reminder of the value I had once brought to the team. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through my notes, the paper crinkling under the pressure of my grip. The aftermath of the crisis weighed heavily on us all. I had seen the way my colleagues exchanged glances during team meetings, some filled with skepticism, others with a flicker of hope. I recalled the conversation I had with Jenna just the day before, her voice laced with encouragement. "You have to believe in your work, Samantha. It's what saved us, and it's time everyone recognized that," she had said, her eyes sparkling with an unwavering belief that I desperately needed. As I stood in front of the whiteboard, the office around me buzzed with a nervous energy. I could hear snippets of conversations, my team members whispering about the importance of collaboration. The tension was palpable, and I knew I had to channel that into a solution. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest as I prepared to present my plan. The room fell silent, all eyes fixed on me, and I could feel the weight of their expectations pressing down like a heavy blanket. I know I've made mistakes, but I also know that my old code is the key to our recovery, I began, my voice steady but tinged with urgency. We need to integrate it back into our system, and I'm ready to lead that process. This isn't just about me, it's about us reclaiming our reputation and proving that experience has its value. The murmurs grew louder, a ripple of disbelief and intrigue washing through the room as I spoke. I could see Mark's expression shift, the arrogance that had so often clouded his judgment now replaced by a flicker of curiosity. He leaned forward, his brow furrowing in concentration. This was my moment, I had to seize it. Our past doesn't define us, but it can guide us forward. Let's work together to ensure we never find ourselves in this position again, I implored, locking eyes with each member of my team. The air in the room began to change, a sense of realization dawning upon them. As I laid out my vision, I could feel the walls of doubt begin to crumble, replaced by a tentative sense of unity. My heart raced not from fear but from a burgeoning sense of relief. I had finally found my voice, and with it, the hope of redemption for both myself and my team. In the quiet corner of my office, the tension hung thick in the air, punctuated only by the sound of my fingers tapping anxiously against the cool surface of my desk. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting harsh shadows across the brainstorming wall filled with ideas, sketches, and fragments of my plan. A cacophony of emotions surged within me, excitement mingled with anticipation, each heartbeat echoing the stakes at hand. I was determined to reclaim my position and prove the worth of my old code, the very code that had become the lifeline for our $1.1 billion pipeline. As I stood before the wall, the remnants of my last presentation flashed in my mind, Mark's smug expression, the laughter that had followed my revelations, and the way my colleagues had turned their backs on me. The bitterness of their ridicule stung, a reminder of the mockery I had endured, yet it also fueled my resolve. I could not allow myself to be the punchline any longer. I would turn their doubts against them, and in doing so, I would reclaim my narrative. I began to sketch out the framework for my presentation, outlining the key points I wanted to convey. The undeniable value of my code, the urgency of the current crisis, and how it could serve as a bridge to our recovery. Each word I wrote felt like a step closer to vindication. I could almost hear the whispers of my colleagues, their skepticism transforming into intrigue as I laid out my plan. This was not just about revenge, it was about regaining respect and proving that experience and tradition held their own weight in a world obsessed with innovation. With each bullet point I crafted, I envisioned the room filled with my peers, their expressions shifting from doubt to realization. I could already see Jenna's encouraging smile, Tom's supportive nod, and even Mark's begrudging acknowledgement of my capabilities. I would make them listen, and as the excitement bubbled within me, I knew that this was my moment to shine. I took a deep breath, the scent of fresh coffee wafting in from the break room, invigorating my spirit. This was the turning point I had been waiting for, and I was ready to execute my plan with precision. As I closed my notebook, determination coursed through me. I would not just present my code. I would present a vision for our future, one where collaboration flourished over arrogance. The anticipation of that day filled me with a sense of purpose, and I felt a thrill of excitement at the thought of reclaiming my rightful place in the team. I was prepared to confront the past and emerge victorious, no longer just a relic of outdated practices but a key player in our company's revival. This ends with me, I thought, and I would make sure everyone knew it. The conference room buzzed with anticipation, a palpable energy crackling in the air as I stood before my colleagues, the stakes higher than ever. The polished surface of the long table reflected the bright overhead lights, accentuating the tension etched on every face. I could hear faint murmurs, a mixture of doubt and curiosity as I prepared to present my plan, a plan that rested on the fragile shoulders of my old code. The scent of fresh coffee lingered, mingling with the crispness of the papers stacked neatly in front of me, a comforting reminder of the countless hours I had poured into this moment. Taking a deep breath, I felt the weight of every gaze upon me, their scrutiny like a spotlight illuminating my insecurities. I could see Mark sitting at the far end, his arms crossed tightly, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. The memory of his mockery echoed in my mind, a taunting reminder of how I had been treated just days before. "This old code of yours is a relic, Samantha. You really think it can save us?" I could almost hear his laugh ringing in my ears. But today I was determined to prove him wrong. I cleared my throat, the sound echoing off the walls, and began, "Thank you all for being here. I know the past few weeks have been challenging, and I appreciate your willingness to listen." My voice trembled slightly, betraying my nerves, but I pressed on. I unfolded my plan, detailing how my old code was not just a fallback but a robust solution that could address the current crisis. The words flowed from me, fueled by my need for validation and the desire to reclaim my place among my peers. As I delved deeper into the technical aspects, I noticed a shift in the room. The initial skepticism began to fade, replaced by intrigue as I laid out the potential benefits my code could bring. I could see Jenna nodding subtly, her supportive nature shining through the clouds of doubt. I remembered her encouragement when I had doubted my abilities, her optimism a lifeline in my darkest moments. With each passing second, I felt my confidence swell, pushing back against the insecurities that had plagued me for so long. But then Mark interjected, a sharp edge to his voice. "You really think we can rely on something outdated? What if it fails, we could lose everything?" His words cut through the air, a stark reminder of the risks we faced. I met his gaze, refusing to back down. "Mark, sometimes the answers we seek are not in the latest trends but in the foundational principles that have served us well. My code has proven its reliability, and in this critical moment, that's what we need more than anything." The room fell silent, the weight of my assertion hanging heavy. I could feel the tension shift, a collective breath held as my colleagues processed my words. In that moment, I realized I was no longer just defending my work. I was standing up for myself, reclaiming my voice from the shadows of doubt. I pressed forward, elaborating on the steps we would take to implement my solution, the energy in the room transforming from skepticism to a cautious optimism. As I wrapped up my presentation, I felt a surge of triumph mingled with disbelief. Could this really be happening? I had faced the ridicule, the doubt, and now I had turned it into a rallying call for collaboration. The applause that followed was tentative at first, but it grew in strength, echoing off the walls of the conference room like a long-awaited affirmation. I could see Mark's expression shift from mockery to reluctant acknowledgement, a small victory in itself. In that moment, I knew I had not only proven my worth but had also opened the door for a new chapter in our team's journey. As I stepped down from the podium, my heart swelled with a mix of relief and triumph. I had faced my fears and emerged stronger, ready to embrace the challenges ahead with renewed resolve. The journey toward redemption was far from over, but I had taken the first decisive step forward, and I was ready to continue fighting for my place in this world, one code at a time. The atmosphere in the office shifted dramatically after the crisis, and I could feel the weight of my contributions beginning to be recognized. As I entered the brightly lit conference room, the air buzzed with a mixture of excitement and anticipation. My colleagues gathered around, their faces reflecting a range of emotions, relief, curiosity, and a hint of newfound respect. It was a stark contrast to the tension that had once filled our meetings, and I stood at the front, my heart pounding with a mix of pride and apprehension. "I want to thank everyone for your hard work during the crisis. It was a team effort, and I'm grateful to have such talented individuals by my side," I began, my voice steady but tinged with emotion. As I scanned the room, I noticed Mark leaning against the wall, his expression softening as he nodded in acknowledgement. It was a small gesture, but it felt monumental, a sign that perhaps I had begun to earn back some of the respect I had lost. The discussions that followed were vibrant, filled with ideas on how to prevent future issues and enhance collaboration. I felt a surge of energy as I contributed my thoughts, my voice rising above the chatter, no longer overshadowed by doubt. My old code had proven its worth, not just as a solution but as a symbol of resilience. I could see my colleagues rallying around the concept of blending innovation with the wisdom of experience, and it filled me with hope. After the meeting, as we gathered for a celebratory lunch, the atmosphere was filled with laughter and camaraderie. I found myself sitting next to Jenna, who beamed at me from across the table. "I knew you could do it, Samantha. You really turned things around," she said, her enthusiasm infectious. I felt a warmth spread through me, a sense of belonging that had been absent for far too long, yet even amid the joy, I couldn't shake the lingering shadows of my earlier decisions. As I reflected on the journey, I realized that redemption was not merely about regaining trust. It was about learning from my mistakes and embracing the lessons they brought. I caught Mark's eye, and for the first time, we exchanged a knowing smile. Perhaps this was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where collaboration triumphed over competition. As the day drew to a close, I took a moment to step outside and breathe in the crisp air. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the city, and I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. I had faced my fears, confronted my mistakes, and emerged stronger. I knew that the road ahead would still have its challenges, but I was ready to embrace them, confident in my abilities and the support of my team. This was my moment of closure, a turning point where I could finally see the value of not just my work but the connections I had forged along the way. With a renewed sense of purpose, I walked back into the office, ready to continue this journey of growth and collaboration. The echoes of laughter and shared successes filled the air, a reminder that together we could overcome anything. My old code had not just saved the company, it had rekindled the spirit of teamwork that I had almost lost. This was the beginning of a new era, one where we would thrive together, and I was determined to lead us there. As I stood in front of my team for the final time, the atmosphere buzzed with a palpable sense of accomplishment. The walls of our office, once a backdrop for tension and doubt, now shimmered with the warmth of shared victories. I could smell the faint aroma of fresh coffee mingling with the sweet scent of pastries from our celebratory spread, a feast to honor our hard-earned collaboration. My heart swelled with pride as I glanced around, catching the glimmers of hope and respect in the eyes of my colleagues. They had weathered the storm alongside me, and together we had emerged stronger. In that moment, I recalled the journey we had taken, the misunderstandings, the laughter, and the moments of vulnerability that had brought us closer. I felt a tear of joy welling up, but I quickly blinked it away, focusing instead on the faces that had once seemed distant and skeptical. Now they were allies, friends, and a family forged in the fires of adversity. I took a deep breath, my voice steady as I addressed them. Thank you all for believing in the process and in each other. Together, we transformed our challenges into opportunities for growth. I am proud of what we have accomplished, and I look forward to continuing this journey with each of you by my side. The warmth of their smiles ignited something deep within me, a realization that this was not just a conclusion, but a new beginning. As we gathered for a final team photo, laughter filled the air, a harmonious melody that resonated with my heart. I felt a surge of gratitude wash over me, and for the first time in a long while, I was at peace. This was the legacy I wanted to leave behind, a team that thrived on collaboration, respect, and innovation. In that moment, I knew my story was far from over. With a resolute spirit, I concluded, let's keep pushing boundaries and supporting one another. Together, we can achieve greatness. Subscribe to the channel.